Hi, it's Thursday, July 16th. Happy birthday, Mom. Um, it's Get to Know Your Customers Day. You know, the first thing I did when I saw that was I thought of a man by the name of Mr. Johnson. Now, Mr. Johnson, I was in the newspaper business for a number of years. And Mr. Johnson was a Detroit News customer. Now, the Detroit News and the Detroit Free Press came into an agreement and they started operating together. Both papers were still published. However, it was under what was referred to as a joint operating agreement. They were killing each other, one trying to drive the other one out of business. And so they decided to operate together. Went all the way to the Supreme Court. They said they were able to do it. And so as we merged things together, the morning paper was to be the Free Press, the afternoon paper was to be the Detroit News. And all of a sudden I had two newspapers I was in charge of. All right. So I went from having like three drivers to, at one point, 11 drivers and a lot of paper boys. And I was in charge of these people. Now, Mr. Johnson was a Detroit News customer, so he wanted a morning paper, so he switched over to the Free Press. But as he would read the Free Press, he discovered he really didn't like the Free Press. So he switched back to the Detroit News. It should be simple enough. Well, I got to tell you something. Everybody and their mother messed up on Mr. Johnson. And the number one person who messed up on Mr. Johnson was me. I could have taken care of this from day one, but I didn't. I handed it off to, I canceled it on the Free Press driver, but she didn't cancel it. And I re-upped it on the news driver, and he never started it. And then once we got everything settled, then their substitutes, because each one of them had substitutes, got it wrong. It's just kind of interesting the way all these things just kind of work together to mess up Mr. Johnson's newspaper. And the district manager, all of a sudden, not the district manager, but the regional manager got involved in this. And he ended up talking to Mr. Johnson a couple of times on the telephone. And he called me into his office and he brought in all the complaints and he laid them down to me. And he started talking and he says, why haven't you taken care of this? And I started thinking about excuse and I started thinking about this excuse. And I said, you know what? I've messed up. Jim, I've lied to you. This hasn't been taken care of. I'll take care of it today. And I drove out to Mr. Johnson's house. I got to know Mr. Johnson. And we took care of it. And I gave him my phone number. I gave him my cell phone number. And in that day and time, and a few people had cell phones, and it was very expensive to get a cell phone call. But I gave him my cell phone number, and he said, you call this at any time. If you don't have a paper, I'll bring it out to you personally. And I began to do that. You know, Mr. Johnson, on the day before I was leaving to become pastor of the church that I'm at right now, he called me out. He said, I didn't get my paper. He lied to me. And I went out there, and he gave me a Bible dated back to 1872. And he gave me his grandfather's parallel New Testament. Those are very special to me. One is displayed in a case in my office right now, and the other one I pull off the shelf every once in a while as I'm looking at scripture and preparing sermons. You know, it's good to get to know people. Now, Jesus said we are to love our neighbor and not to treat them at a distance. So I'm not going to say, get to know your customer today. I'm going to say, get to know your neighbor today. And that's my thought for today. God bless.